Hello, this is Danny Raymond, the voice behind Ray's Guide, and even though I talked some about CIG's surprising addition of a skill level system to both Squadron 42 and Star Citizen previously, and why this is such a fundamental change, and if you want to argue that the new skill system isn't a character leveling system,
level up to level that skill, to level up, level them, level up, level them, level them, level them,
I'm not convinced. And those that say it really isn't much of a change because your targeting isn't not being determined by your skills, I'm also not convinced because there are so many things controlled by it that determine whether you get a chance to take the shot at all.
You can sprint further. Force reactions like weapon swapping, going to ADS, how resistant you are to the environment, go longer without sustenance, G-force and redouts, sustain higher Gs longer, you can sprint longer, hold more Gs. And those physical attributes will denote how effective you are at certain things.
And in trying to figure out how to describe the significance of this, I came up with a reference to two monster titles in the history of computer games, which, despite many external similarities of setting and theme, each of which took a huge part of the game industry down a path of following them. And the new skill system essentially jumps Star Citizen from one to the other. And that's why it feels so fundamental. The first is Doom, the seminal first-person shooter. Wolfenstein 3D created the path the year before, but Doom's better graphics plus multiplayer and fan-created levels catapulted it to the level of not just a game phenomenon, but a cultural landmark. And while Wolfenstein 3D had a name and identity for the game character, the Doom guy, as he came to be known, in the game instructions simply called him you. And that was part of the excitement of it. You were you. If you beat the level, it was because you were good. If you won the game, it was because of no other reason than you were good. And if you beat somebody in multiplayer, it was thrilling specifically because it meant you, just you, were better than them. And Doom caused a branch of computer games that included almost countless successors like Duke Nukem, Quake, Bioshock, GoldenEye, Half-Life, Halo, Battlefield, Counter-Strike, Call of Duty, and until the evening of October 8, 2022, every single Chris Roberts game, including Star Citizen, and we presumed Squadron 42. The second game is Diablo, the seminal RPG, and viewed at a superficial level, there's a lot the same about it and Doom. Underground caves, demons, all that, but there were far more differences. Sure, there were predecessors, but Diablo came about as close as possible to creating a real-time Dungeons & Dragons experience without having to pay royalties to Gary Gygax. And part of that was the character sheet with its character attributes, magical inventories, and such. Sure, there was skill involved in playing Diablo, but it was skill in managing the character sheet and inventory, timing on when to take the healing and mana potions and when to use the spells. It was less your skill at being you and more of your skill at managing this other person, described by the character sheet. And Diablo launched its own major branch of the gaming tree, including RPGs like Fate, Neverwinter Nights, Dungeon Siege, Baldur's Gate, Fallout, Skyrim, Assassin's Creed, Ultima Online, EverQuest, World of Warcraft, the upcoming Starfield, and apparently, as of the evening of October 8, 2022, Star Citizen and Squadron 42.
Essentially build your character.
Give you as much. So all of those different physical attributes, it allows you to progress your character in those ways. Skilling up your character because you're saying, that's the dedicated area of focus that you want. You can run further than them. You can carry things, that are heavier than they can. You can equip things onto you and it doesn't affect you as much. So all of those different physical attributes, it allows you to progress your character in those ways.
That statement is definitive of no longer you being you, but you being defined by a character sheet visible on your mobiGlass. But what is behind these two branches of action-adventure games? What presumption makes one game go with you are you, no character sheet, and another with you are managing a character defined by the character sheet? Well, to go back to the original character sheet game of D&D, it was the feeling that you are a wizard or a dwarf or an elf or a cleric was just too large of a leap of imagination. There had to be a further abstraction to cushion it. of your character defined by that character sheet. Of course, most of the URU games also presume that you had some level of alteration. Pretty much all presume that you had finished military training of some sort, and if applicable, also flight school. But the game makers felt that that was not too large of a leap, which makes the choice of needing the abstraction of a character sheet in Star Citizen particularly puzzling, because we certainly aren't playing anybody more special than we played in the entire Wing Commander series without the need of it. If anything, completely the opposite. Most of us are playing even more mundane, like space truckers, space miners, space delivery drivers, and, with the taxi missions, space Uber drivers. Nothing, literally nothing, requires less of a stretch of imagination than my being an Uber driver in the future. So Star Citizen switching to the character sheet model would seem to be one of the most unnecessary steps ever. Now, unlike some, I am not going to be wringing my hands about how this is going to destroy the game. The games in the branch of game evolution stemming from Diablo are good games, occasionally great games, just as there are good and even great games in the branch of game evolution stemming from Doom, including the fact that we have for 7 years been playing Star Citizen without this change. I will state, though, that most of the best PvP games are in the category of you being you, because you are pitting yourself against each other, not pitting the character you built against the character the other person built. No, my concerns about this center around feature creep. I sure don't think this skill use advancement system was part of the plans all along from 10 years ago, and they just happened to forget to mention it for the last decade. No, the fact has never appeared in the work allocation charts, aka the progress tracker, would seem to indicate that it hasn't even begun. And anything this complex that is going to have so many hooks from nearly every action in the game, and then hooks to almost every action we take, plus all the testing and balancing, is not going to be adding weeks or even months to the Squadron 42 being released. It is most likely going to be adding a year or more for a feature that literally nobody was missing or asking for. And that will be additional months and years before work gets put onto the features that we have been asking and waiting for. Now, some people said of my prior comments on the skill system that they thought CIG was just trying to create an additional impact from Death of a Spaceman in order to make players more careful about avoiding defeat. Well, fine, but if that is the desire, then just do that. Make people a little woozy for a period of time after being regenerated because of the whole, just having been dead thing.
There doesn't leave much time for dilly-dally.
You just wiggle your finger. That's wonderful.
I've always been a quick eater.
Having unnecessarily complex solutions to simple desires is, in fact, the most common source of feature creep. Secondarily, as a feature creep, it brings up worries about who is in control of the scope of the project still. As I suggested earlier, this is not a typical Chris Roberts feature from a typical Chris Roberts game. When I spoke to Chris at the Los Angeles Star Citizen World Tour, he said that there were no big items still in the road ahead, just lots of polishing. It certainly seems to me that a whole skill use advancement system, including all the upstream and downstream connections and testing and balancing, would count as a big item still to be done. So it sure gives me the impression that it was added since this June when I talked to Chris. Whose vision did this come from? And is anybody really keeping a lid on the feature creep? Because this whole system of abilities and techniques sure feels like a huge new feature creep. And now for an update on our Grow the Channel Ship giveaway. As of recording, we are at 94% of the subscriber goal and 100% of the membership goal or the IAE Expo, whichever happens first, to give away to some lucky player their choice of the Anvil Liberator, the Ship Shipping Ship for shipping your ships, or the Misk Odyssey Long Length Look Ahead Launcher Lorry. One entry per video. Members prior to the publication of the winning video are entered automatically, and if the winner is a member as of the publication date of the winning video and at the drawing time, remember that if you've let your membership expire, they will win both the Liberator and the Odyssey. For non-members, just be a subscriber and comment with the secret word. And the secret word for this video is variable. Just name a video game other than the ones I mentioned, and whether it comes from the Diablo or Doom branch of gameplay. Fly safe, keep it real, and I'll see you in the verse. This is Danny Raymond for Ray's Guide.